Hello, Mason Storm here. I was going down to the grocery store and I was going to get some puff pastry and was going to make a chicken pot pie, but I forgot the puff pastry, so now we're having chicken vegetable casserole. Stay tuned to see how it's done. Our fabulous casserole consists of asparagus, standard onion, peas and carrots, broccoli, and chicken. The peas and carrots and broccoli are of the frozen variety for convenience. For priority of vegetables, it goes fresh, frozen, then canned. Canned should be avoided as much as possible. Okay, time to start cutting the asparagus. To begin with, we're going to remove the bottoms of the asparagus. This can be quite hard and tough to chew on and taste bad, so by all means, eliminate it. And just grab a couple at a time, lay them down flat and slicey, and before you know it, you'll be done cutting off all the tips of your asparagus, and you'll have accomplished something. And that's just fabulous. Of course, now we have to cut our asparagus, so we're going to go for nice bite-sized pieces, so that when you get your spoon into your chicken fun mix casserole, that you get a little bit of everything. Get a little bit of a sample, you get to try everything, and you get this just a whole whack of flavors all in your mouth at the same time. It makes for such a joyful experience in respect to consumption. And now that we're done with our asparagus, which looks beautiful, we're going to move on to our standard onion. So I'm just going to cut it in half, root ways, and that'll let me peel off the outside, while at the same time holding it together to make cutting a little bit easier. Now it's important that you get right across the root. If you don't, you run into what I did here, whereas even with my cat's claw grip, I don't really have enough root to grab hold of, so I'm forced to use a substandard form of cutting. But you cut enough onions, eventually you get good at it and you get in the groove, and onion cutting isn't that big of a deal. You cut with haste, you cut carefully and precisely, but quickly. It's quite the system. Okay, we'll just quickly finish up the other half of the onion. And now there's one ingredient I forgot, and that was garlic. So I'm just going to cut up a couple cloves of garlic. Just taking those little ends off because they're kind of a little bit nippy. Do the blade crush method and then the cross cut smaller pieces mince method. And there we go. We're all good to go. And time to work on our meat. So I cleaned my area, washed the board off. Now something you want to do is you always want to cut your meat last if you're going to use the same cutting board as you did your vegetables on. So we're just doing a couple lines across, and then we're doing a bit of a big dice. And this will create nice bite-sized pieces of meat for our enjoyment. I find that doing larger cuts of meat, like cutting bigger chunks than I do the vegetables, makes it look like there's more meat in the dish than there actually is. Not that it matters with this particular batch that I'm making, because there definitely was a lot of meat. So we're going to start by cooking our meat a little bit. So we got ourselves a nice big pan. We'll crank the temperature up on the stove to maximum or near maximum. And then we'll proceed to dump in our chicken into our pan. Perfect. Now we're going to also want to add a little bit of oil here, because you really want to, whenever you're frying something, you either want to fry it in oil or fry it in butter. And I'm deciding to go with oil this time. So now that we got the oil in there and the chicken, we add in our onion. I figure why not cook down the onion? You can pretty much cook onion as long as you want, and it always tastes better. The good thing that happens when you cook onion down is that the sugars in the onion start to break down, and then you can get a little bit of caramelization, which is just fantastic. Although we won't be cooking it long enough to do that. To do that, you'd have to cook your onion first, then add your chicken sometime later, and then you could have caramelized onion with chicken, which that sounds amazing, and I wish I did that. Either way, we need some sort of sauce to go with this, so we're going to make actually a bit of a roux. But there's other types of sauces you could use. A real easy one would be to just use mushroom soup mix and dump it in, and that can be pretty delicious too. For our roux, I'm going to use a 1/3 cup of butter and 3 tablespoons of flour, and then I have a cup of cream and a cup of milk. I was going to use 2 cups of milk, but I didn't have a bowl big enough, and cream's better than milk, so why not? To begin with, we get ourselves a nice saucepan on the stove. We turn up our temperature to about medium, maybe medium high, and then we add in our butter. Now what we're going to do is we're going to melt our butter, and once it's all liquidy, we're going to add the flour, and then we're going to stir like crazy. Now that our butter is all melted, we're going to pour in our flour, and then we're just going to keep mixing it. If you don't mix it, it'll kind of clump up and burn, which tastes terrible, so don't do that. And then once your flour is all added and you're mixing it and it's all kind of combined, just kind of set a timer or just mentally take a note, and you want to cook it for about 2 to 5 minutes. And it changes a little bit visually, but you really just want to cook it for a little bit of time, and that'll get rid of a little bit of the flour taste, so it tastes a little bit more buttery. Afterwards, we'll dump in our milk and cream. We're going to continue to stir this, and eventually it'll start to thicken up as it heats up and whatnot. Meanwhile, we got to keep an eye on our chicken stuff. So I just add a little bit of Worcestershire sauce and some salt and pepper, and that's all good to go now. So I'm going to take this off the heat, and I'm going to dump it into my casserole dish. If you don't want it to be as moist as mine, you can run it through a strainer first over the kitchen sink. Get rid of a little bit of the juice. And our roux is just about ready. It's starting to really thicken up. It goes pretty quick once you get the milk in it. So I'm just going to set that off the heat, and we'll go back to the main stove here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pre-cook my vegetables a little bit. So the broccoli, the peas and carrots, they're a little bit frozen because they're frozen vegetables. So I at least want them up to temperature. So let's dump all those in there, and we'll give that a little bit of a cook. While I'm waiting for the vegetables to cook, I'm going to finish off the roux. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grate some Parmesan cheese into the top of the roux, and then I'll give it a little bit of a mix, as well as some salt and pepper, because we're going to need a little bit more salt and pepper flavor in all of this stuff. So it's one of those recipes that you can kind of put it in everything. So every step along the way, just add a little bit more salt and pepper, and by the end you should have it about right. Just don't put loads of it in at any given point in time. And once our cheese is in there, a quick stir, because it's still so hot it just instantly disappears. And now we have a nice creamy roux sauce that's going to be perfect for our dish. So now I'm going to throw the asparagus into the mix with the vegetables. They've kind of thawed out and they're cooking them down a little bit, so it's probably a good time to throw them in. And I think I put the garlic in here at some point in time. If not, I put it in the chicken and skimmed over the footage. Either way, if you didn't put the garlic in the chicken, put it in with the vegetables, and it's all good. So now we're just going to let that cook down for a couple minutes. Might actually put the lid on the vegetables because that makes them cook a little bit faster. Because now we're racing the clock. We don't want our chicken to cool off. We don't want our roux to turn into a solid, and we just need a little bit of heat on our vegetables. Really, you can throw them right in to begin with, but then you'd have to bake it for longer. And because I want to make this in kind of a expedited way, I'm pre-cooking everything a little bit. Well, the chicken's all totally pre-cooked and the vegetables are mostly cooked, so I'll be able to have everything all cook in a hurry, which is exactly what I want. But if you're lazy, you can just dump everything all in together and just put it in the oven at a low temperature and let it cook for a couple hours, and you got yourself something fancy. Okay, now that that's been cooking for a few minutes with the lid on, take the lid off. Everything seems all nice and perfect. So now, time to do the combining. So I'm just going to pour all the vegetables on top of the chicken that's already in the casserole pan. And then I'm going to pour the sauce on top of that. And the sauce, I guess it is starting to cool off a little bit. It's not as liquidy as it was before. And if you're making this for yourself, you might want to make more sauce than I did if you like a really saucy casserole. But I didn't feel like having a really saucy casserole today, so I went a little bit more mild on the sauce. And just kind of work it in. Use your wooden spoon and work the sauce into the meat and vegetables and kind of mix everything around. That way it's all evenly distributed. And the extra moisture from the meat really works good in kind of thinning out the sauce a little bit, so It's not super thick. And then of course we're going to cover this with some salt and pepper and a little bit of Parmesan cheese. Now if you want to take this to the next level, shred up a bunch of cheddar cheese or mozzarella and sprinkle that on the top. And then maybe a little bit of panko. Oh my goodness, that would definitely take this to the next level. But I'm just doing the basics here. So salt and pepper, a little bit of Parmesan, and then into the oven it goes. 350 degrees, and I'm going to cook this about 40 minutes, I guess. If you're doing the raw vegetable method where you just dump everything in all at once, you're probably going to have to cook it quite a bit longer. And if you're doing the raw meat method, even longer yet, because you definitely want to make sure it's all cooked. So maybe like 300 degrees and then cook it for like an hour and a half or something. But either way, here we go. There, it's starting to cook in the oven, just like we want. And it doesn't take very long. So once it comes out, you have this nice bubbling ooze. And the stuff just smells amazing. The whole kitchen, the whole house smells of this. A lovely mixture. So let me know in the comments below how you like to make your casseroles. And if you like my content and would like to see more of it, please like and subscribe. And until next time, stay awesome.